Hello everyone, Mark Major here. This is the Action Figure-atorium. Some of you know by now that I'm a real big collector of toys. I'm also a guy who slugged it out on the killing floor selling guitars for 10 years at 3 different guitar shops before going on to sell CRM software, customer relations management software, and then going on to sell usability testing to Fortune 500 companies. I now run a studio in Southeast Portland, and I have to market to marketing people. So I tend to make a lot of videos in which I look at the marketing aspect of the toy industry, and I also look at a lot of Kickstarters and evaluate them based upon their offerings, based upon their price, all those sort of things that tell you that this is going to succeed or fail. And one of the things that you have probably heard me say over and over and over again is the rent's too damn high. It is too expensive for these toys, these action figures. Of course, people push back and they say you're ignorant, you don't know how much these things cost to make, which is partially true. I don't have, the costs in front of me here. But what people don't seem to realize is that is supply side pricing based upon what it costs to manufacture. People don't seem to realize that there needs to be something known as demand side pricing that goes on, and that's basically what are people willing to pay, and that is what I'm going to be talking about today on the Action Figure-atorium. So won't you guys stick around. All right, hope everybody's having a great summer so far. If this is your first time arriving at an Action Figure-atorium video, you are at the right spot. Feel free to subscribe and watch new videos coming out. Also, go back to the catalog and check some of the older videos. There's some really interesting vids I've put out regarding manufacture and pricing of the toy industry and certain toys. I've looked at the HasLabs as well as several Kickstarters. And there's a couple of gems in there. So when we talk about supply side pricing, right? Everyone seems to be a little bit of an expert because they saw a video by like an ex-toy company employee who told you that the injection molds cost $100,000 and that they end up being used as boat anchors after they're no longer needed. I think that's kind of probably a euphemism. Most people describe a useless piece of junk as a boat anchor. Boat anchors actually have to be a specific size, shape, and weight, so I don't think that these big steel injection molds end up being used in any kind of Hong Kong harbor. Probably recycled if that's the case, if they don't want to pay to store them. But we get the idea that, yeah, they're a lot of money, and then after use they kind of aren't needed anymore. And you may have heard that sometimes they can cost up to $100,000 or more, which, is probably true to an extent. And you probably know that there's some other manufacturing costs associated with making toys. We all know that the plastic itself costs money, the little pellets that go into the injection molds. We know that to put paint on a toy costs money. Extra accessories and pieces like vinyl capes and shoulder bits, things like that, of course, cost money. Somebody to apply the paint, somebody to assemble the toy. Then you also have to have packaging printed up and delivered. The toys have to go into it. They have to then be stored somewhere. They then have to be put into a container and shipped. All of that costs money. And then when it gets to the United States, there's a whole new round of money costs for this. It has to be, the container has to be unloaded, and then you have to empty the container, and you have to get it into trucks, and you have to get it to distribution centers, and then the selling begins. And that's just to have a toy manufactured. What about the costs of just having a company going, like a Hasbro or Mattel? They've got salaries that are going to include things like the CEO, the CFO, the CTO. Then all those people have secretaries. There's admin. There's plenty of of middle management. There's going to be salespeople. There's going to be marketing people. There's going to be marketing budgets. There's also going to be customer support. You're going to have HR people. You're going to have payroll. You might have rent on the office building. Some people might need computers. Some people might get phones. Some people might actually get a company car. And then you've got, the lawn care attendant, the parking garage attendant. There could be janitors. There could be HVAC people. So even if it's an indie company, right, they're still going to have some of those costs on some level. And that also has to be factored into the cost of the toy. And one of the pushbacks I hear from people on me is that I don't understand the costs of this. And I do understand the costs of this, but in no way can you just start with, okay, I want to make a thing. Okay, how much does it cost to make it? Cost this much. All right, well, I'm going to do that and I'm going to charge the customer this much. What people don't seem to understand is what is known as the demand side pricing. Now, before I get into the demand side pricing, what you need to all come to Jesus on is how things are marked up. Generally speaking, theoretically, of course, there's always these sweetheart deals, backdoor deals, bulk pricing, stuff like that. But in general, from retail to suggested manufacturer's list price is generally what's called an A mark, and it's like a 50% markup. So if you find something in retail that costs $100, right, to you, the customer, the store that is selling it generally paid about half to get it, and that's called an A mark. There's A marks, there's B marks, there's C marks. It may not always be the case that it's always a flat A mark, but in general, for the theory that we're all caught up on, if it costs the retailer $50, they charge the customer $100, and then it's up to the retailer if they want to do 10% off, 15%, 20% off, whatever, depending upon what kind of margins they want to be making or need to be making to stay open. Now, it's generally considered that if the retailer paid $50 for it, the person who wholesaled it to them, they paid probably half of that to have it manufactured, $25, right? And so you can see how something that is technically sort of a $25 item in parts is now $100 when you go to buy it. So if for whatever reason it costs $55 more for this $25 item to get some sort of a thing to make it better, right? So that now the manufacturing cost is $30. Well, now the retailer is going to pay $60, and now it's going to have a suggested list of $120. So by adding an extra $5 down here, it ends up being a little bit down there. So it may be sometimes difficult to see the value of something because it's getting so many markups along the way. But that is essentially how prices are thought of and achieved when pricing to the customer. Okay. Now, when we get to how they decide what to make and how much to charge, there's almost always a type of a meeting that happens amongst decision makers and analysts. And so the decision makers will say, hey, how much of this widget, right, can we make and sell at what price? Meaning, what's the most amount of these we can sell for the highest amount of price? And the analyst should have the answer. They should say, okay, if we charge this much for our widget, we can sell this many. If we lower the price, we will of course sell more because more people can afford something that costs less, right? We make less money on each one, but we might end up selling more to where it might be more beneficial in the long run because we're going to sell a lot more of them. It's going to equal out to bigger profits overall. Or they might say, yeah, we're going to raise the price even though we're going to sell a little bit less. We're going to be making more per item. The goal, however, is to get the most amount of units sold at the highest price that they can. So after they come out with this magic number, right, of how many they're going to sell at what price, you of course need to then ask the question, okay, but can we manufacture manufacture it to get it to that price at retail? If this thing is going to sell at retail for $100, can we manufacture it for $25? If they can't, right, they're either going to have to go back to the analysts and adjust raising the price and figure out how many they're going to sell, or they got to go back to the design of the widget and redo it. Now, toy collectors out there, how many of you have seen them show something, reveal something on like a live stream or a Comic-Con, or they just kind of announce it and all of a sudden you see it on some sort of toy site, and the product that they show you eventually ends up being different from the one they ship? Meaning they promised more accessories, they don't have them. They promised more paint or different paint, it's not the same. Or they promised something like pinless joints, and then it turns out that the joints have pins. Well, what happened there was they had to go back and they had to change the design so they could get it into that price point, right? How many of you out there who collect toys have seen them announce a toy at a certain price? I'll give you an example. Remember the Hasbro selfie, right? That was, you took a picture of yourself, sent it in, they gave you an action figure with your head on it, and they said these were going to be $60, right? What happened when it came out? It was $80. They raised the price. Why? Well, after that decision meeting happened, they had to go back and fix their numbers because they couldn't actually make those toys for, you know, all the margins that they needed to hit, so they had to raise the price. Consequently, I told people in a video I made about the HasLab selfie action figures, and I said, yeah, these might be a good thing to get one for yourself because you don't know if they're ever going to do this again. But as soon as they came out and they were $80, I was like, nah, don't give them any money for this. If you really want a 3D sculpt of your head for an action figure, take that money and go pay somebody who does 3D printing and let them custom make a one-off for you, and you'll be much happier. That's my advice. And I think my advice is not bad because, I don't know, do people collect other selfie action? Like, it's not going to go up in price. You're not going to collect someone else's selfie action figure. Maybe you will. I don't know. It seems like it's not happening. So that is the overall thrust of this argument, is that when you look at something for sale on a toy site and, you know, you compare it to other things, it's real easy for you to say, you know, I think it's too expensive, even though someone's going to say, yeah, but the molds and the deco and the, you know, all this stuff. And like, sure, I get that. I get that it costs money to make this stuff, but how much money, disposable income, do I or anyone have to put towards this? Remember, all these toys compete against everything else. They compete against all the other toys out there. They're competing against video games. They're competing against movies. They're competing against anything recreational and all that you want to go out and spend your time with. You want to go buy a kayak or something. That's less toys for you to buy. All these things compete with everything else when it comes to disposable income. So when they make a toy, they really have to think, how can this toy that I'm cooking up, what can I price it at so as that somebody will buy this instead of something else? Like, why would I buy this Mezco Batman figure when I could get this NECA Batman figure, or you know, or this Hot Toys Batman figure, or you know, something like that. Like, you start lining these things up and you have to make a call on where you're going to spend your money. And so any way that a manufacturer can provide you the most bang for your buck, well, that's how they're going to compete. And so if these guys are coming out with product and people are saying, no, I can't afford them, they're too high, well, two things. Either A, the manufacturer is going to be the guy who ends up buying them, or it shouldn't have gotten made in the first place. And this is kind of the main punchline to this whole video is I see so much supply out there. If you think of how many toy companies out there are cranking out toys, you know, you've got Mezco, NECA, Super 7, a million things coming out of Hasbro, a million things coming out of Mattel. Then you've got all these indie companies, and then you've got all these Kickstarters coming out, right? How can you absorb all these toys? How can the whole toy buying community have enough money to purchase everything out there? And clearly the answer is you can't. There's just way too much supply of toys. And so either you're going to see something come crashing down and part of the toy industry collapse, and you know, let's just name Funko right now as one of those high on the list of a company that could totally disappear in a year, right? But it could be any of these other ones. They could just totally disappear because they're making so much toys, they're making so many widgets, that if people aren't buying them, they're going to be left with all this stock that nobody can afford because there's just not even enough money out there, right? Even if you like put the stuff on clearance, people still couldn't buy it. So something I wanted to look at was real quick was 3 Kickstarters that I kind of covered real briefly a few months back that all sort of came out at the same time. Savage Crucible, Biblical Adventures, and Almighty Legends. 2 of them, of course, got shoehorned into one video by me because they were both sort of Bible action figures, but they're really kind of all worthy of scrutiny. One did extremely well. That was Savage Crucible. One cleared its marks that it had to hit, and it unlocked some extra waves. Not bad for a company that you know, is going for sort of kind of an outside franchise. The Bible, as far as toy collectors go, I mean, it's been around a while. There's no doubt about that. But Bible toy collectors, that's a bit of a fringe. That's a bit of a fringe. It really helped that the guy making it, Chris Garwich, works for the Four Horsemen, and as well as some freelance stuff for some other toy companies, helping them set up their toys in factories in China. And so there was a huge, you know, word of mouth backed with confidence from the buyer on getting those. And then the third Kickstarter is Almighty Legends, another Bible action figure line, and they limped. They barely made it to the finish line. Now, they probably cannibalized each other. They all came out at the same time. They were all running at the same time. And that hurts because that disposable income is all being used up for one or the other, and people can't invest in all 3. They don't have the budget for it. They're going to have to wait until people get some more money back in the bank. But if you look and see the pricing on these, you can see why Savage Crucible crushed it. So first of all, I suggest you go to the Savage Crucible Kickstarter campaign, which you can still find online, and you can see exactly how much money they raised. I want to say that they did $600,000, over $500,000, and the way they did it, right, was they had a lot of selection. Okay, they had a lot of figures to choose from. You've got these lemur men. You've got these barbarian dudes. There's a Frank Frazetta inspired guy, so these dudes all have armor that I'm showing you. Then there was a third wave that was these sort of piranha men. Here they are. And there's kind of a weird Cthulhu guy who sort of comes with them, that dude. Harbinger of the Abyss. I bought one. All right. Then they've got weapons packs, head packs. There's some extra unlocks that you get with your figures. So if you bought one of these particular guys, you got some other stuff. So what really made this work, in addition to the huge selection of figures that they had, was the fact that the cheapest guy was 15 bucks. And these are a 6-inch figure, and they're fantasy figures, so they go with like things like mythic legions, but they could also be weird characters, weird lizard men that your Marvel Legends fight. You know, Cyclops could easily take on 2 or 3 lizard men for whatever reason. As like monsters go, these guys could be shoehorned into just about anything. But 15 bucks was the starting price for one of their guys. And then they, of course, had some mid-level guys, and then they had a couple like expensive guys, which is exactly what you want. You want 3 tiers. Always want 3 tiers so that everyone has a cheap thing that anybody can buy. And there's always a most expensive thing that people who have the money can purchase that. If they want to, you got to have something to take their money to, so you just make something expensive for them. And these guys had it all. Anyway, $600,000 is what this guy cleared on these goofy, weird Lemurian lizard men and Frank Frazetta barbarians, and totally crushed it. I bought 4 Piranha men and a head pack and the weird Cthulhu dude. I'm really excited for these guys. I can't wait for them to show up. It's going to be so much fun. And that's how you do it. He priced them so that anybody could afford these. Now, if we go to Chris's Biblical Adventures, his figures were 25 bucks, and they're 6-inch figures, and they look pretty good. You really got to have a taste for buying like a Jesus action figure, although he did have like some angels, he did have some devils, and those are like kind of generic figures that could go in, you know, monster figures that could sort of go into anything. But some of the other guys are like, you know, Jesus statues or paintings. You know, those are real sort of specific as to who's going to buy those. I myself picked up a Moses action figure from this line. I was going to actually get a couple guys, you know, maybe a dude and some blanks, but I figured just having a Moses would be fun enough, and for $25 it wasn't that big of a hit. Then if we go to Almighty Legends, right, this is a guy who's making these sort of archangels who come in these crazy armor that he's making for them. He went on a lot of live streams and YouTube shows. He showed off his stuff on Facebook and Instagram. I'm telling you, that's great. Definitely do that. The more marketing, the more better. But you got to make sure that everything in your story, everything you're telling people is in your Kickstarter. So when someone goes to the Kickstarter and they don't know anything about you, they don't know anything about your toy line, they don't know anything about your toys, you gotta sell them there. You can't be like, oh yeah, check out some pics over on Facebook, because I'm not going over there. By the time I get to Facebook, I'm tired, all right? And I'm tired of Facebook. That's what makes me tired. So these guys were 45 bucks each. That's essentially what I believe the most expensive Savage Crucible figure was. So this guy did not have any low-hanging fruit for people to buy, right? You had to get a figure, and also he really actually only had one figure you could buy. He was waiting for people to hit all the unlocks for him to make the other archangels that he had worked up, which, by the way, they all have names very reminiscent of the Ninja Turtles, which, of course, I realize, yeah, those came from art historical artists, painters, etc. I know where they got the name, but it's just funny that that we're at this point where all the toys, they're all the same character. So plenty of Leonardos and Raphaels, etc., all that kind of jazz. But at 45 bucks, this guy limped across the line. Most people said he wasn't going to make it. He didn't have the variety of figures that Savage Crucible did. He didn't have the pricing that Savage Crucible did. Even though when I looked at the figures with the wings and the armor, I thought they looked cool. In fact, I thought he should have went even more gonzo. I think he should have had like chrome armor and flocking and stuff like that. I would have went totally nuts. So one last thing before I close this down, and again, this is a video just to let everybody know that this is how you sort of start the discussion. Bobby Valla of his toy company, Valaverse, who does a competitor to G.I. Joe Classifieds. He does a 6-inch modern military line called Action Force. He just announced recently that he's lowering his prices. Figures that were $21, $22 are now coming in at $20, and figures that were like $32, $33 are coming in at an even $30. And he knows that he's competing against everything. And so by lowering his prices, by being able to lower his prices, means that he's now able to fish a line out and scoop up a few extra people who might have been on the fence about these figures, but now that it's cheaper than some of the other stuff out there that they can buy, they're finally going to pull the trigger. And in fact, when he announces his Arctic Troopers and the guy in the Arctic ghillie suit, I'm probably going to get a couple. You know why? That's why. Anyways, glad you guys could make it this far in the video. Again, check out the Instagrams if you haven't already. You can find the Action Figuratorium there. You can also find me on Twitter at ActFigatorium. And give a subscribe and a like to this channel on YouTube, and I will not disappoint, people. I will not disappoint. So everybody, catch you in the next one.